Good morning, everybody! I hope you guys are having the best Saturday morning conceivable. And for you today, I have a little story. So I was walking outside and I saw that somebody threw away a giant piece of wood, pole type of thing. So I thought, hey, I can use that thing. Unfortunately, the person wasn't home, so I couldn't ask them what kind of wood it was. But I quickly rushed home, grabbed the saw, ran towards that wood, cut off the part that seemed to be least cracked. As I was cutting it, I actually saw a lot of insects escape, which kind of concerned me, but then I thought, what the heck. It's free wood, so might as well give it a shot and see how it turns out. So anyways, I dragged it home, and as you see here, I'm doing exactly what anybody would do when turning things. You take a square thing, and then you turn it around. And that's what I'm doing. Eventually, the weather actually got a little bit better, so I took my lathe out. It was like 40 degrees outside. Fresh, crispy air. Felt amazing to turn this wood, seriously, in air. But yeah, as you see, I'm turning it. Kids are running around, having fun, and it was pretty good. I ended up trying to make the bottom as flat as possible, and as soon as it was flattened up, I thought, okay, what do I do now? Unfortunately, this piece of wood was way too large to fit into my chuck, so thus, of course, I couldn't fit it. Then I started rummaging through all the parts that came with the lathe, and I saw a screw in there. I don't know if it's called a screw or whatnot, but I saw a screw type of looking thing, and it seems to have been fitting onto the end that spins. So what I've done is I drilled a hole, I shoved the screw in there, and I attached it to the lathe, and I started turning it. The unfortunate part here is that actually the screw ended up slipping all the time. The piece of wood was far too heavy, I think, for the screw to handle, plus it was too long too, and whenever I was touching it with the chisel, it would instantly just jump out. So I tried to sharpen my chisels, took it very slowly, and eventually I ended up trying to hollow out a part for the chuck to fit in, because I assumed chuck would have more strength than a flimsy screw that came with the Riken lathe. So as you see, that's what I'm doing here. And at the same time, as you see, it's not really concentric. It's wobbling all over the place, but at the very least, the place where the chuck is gonna go, it's gonna be nice and round. So once I made that nice and round piece, I ended up shoving chuck in there, and lo and behold, it's actually balanced. Okay, balanced is a very far-fetched word in here, but as you guys are aware, it was wobbly to begin with. But at the very least, Chuck managed to hold the piece securely, so I could make it concentric, and that's what I'm doing here. So it was all wobbly. I couldn't really make a wobbly cup, didn't want it to turn out to be like the wobbly spinning top that I made, so I took my time and I ended up making sure that this piece ends up being as round as possible. The unfortunate part, I actually lost a lot of width of this object just because of all the misfortune that befell me due to my lack of skills. By the way, guys, if you know how I can secure this better for the future, please let me know. I was really frustrated not knowing how to secure this, and I would be forever grateful if you guys could tell me how to do this. But anyways, as you see, the piece was finally complete, and now it was time to start making a hole inside. But I don't have Forstner bits. So I end up quickly running to Home Depot. I purchased two drilling things. I'm not sure what they're called, but the person has vouched that they should be drilling. At the end, I was too frustrated. They weren't drilling well enough, or maybe my drill was just simply not powerful, but it was a very frustrating process. So what ended up happening is I got frustrated. I said, no way in heck am I drilling with those. I ended up putting it back on a lathe, and I thought, hey, I can make a hole with the lathe much faster than I would be able to drill. Not to mention, drilling made my hands hurt far too much. So that's what you see me doing here. I made a hole. Overall, I think it took me about an hour to make that hole. Far too long. Not to mention, I ended up having to learn how to really properly sharpen my chisels. After I was more or less content with the shape of the cup, I ended up sanding it. Well, actually, most of the things that you guys don't see here is I got my kids to sand it. They have had quite a blast. And don't worry, both of them have masks on, so it's not like they were breathing in all of that sawdust. So they're sanding it, I'm sanding it. We had a lot of fun together. Ended up sanding it actually to 200 grit. I didn't want it to make it too smooth, just because I wanted to have a nice grippy texture, since I assumed I would need it if it's going to be holding so much wood, and that's why I did it like that. Anyways, that's what I'm doing here, sanding away and getting this ready for oiling. When I started oiling this thing, I actually noticed that the surface of the cup was very, very smooth. I found it extremely odd, and it didn't really make too much sense to me because it felt like a 1000 grit cup. So I ended up doing the whole thing which I usually do. I ended up oiling it, sanding it, oiling it, sanding it. That's kind of something you don't see here, but that's what I did. I got you 600 grit here. Unfortunately, I can't really tell the difference between 600 grit or 200 grit sanded cup. So if you guys know the difference, please let me know. I'd appreciate it. So once I was happy with the general shape of the cup, I realized that there's no way that my tiny hands will be able to hold this cup and all the tea contained within. Therefore I decided I need myself a handle. So I jumped on paint, drew a handle, printed it out. Took me about 10 prints to make sure that the size of the picture was correct. Took a piece of wood from whatever was left over from cutting the cup, glued it on, and I got myself new jigsaw. And I ended up cutting this, as you see here. So once the cutting is complete, I use this round sanding thing that I also purchased from Amazon, and I sanded the handle to have nice, pleasant to hold rounded corners, more or less. It's not the best, but overall it was still pleasant to hold compared to before, where it would actually be digging into my hands. So once the corners were rounded, I realized another problem. I can't attach the handle to the cup properly. So what I ended up doing is I wrapped the cup in a piece of sandpaper, and then I ended up taking the handle and rubbing it against the cup wrapped in the sandpaper in order to make sure that the point where the handle touches the cup ends up having the same contour as the cup. Once that's done, I'm happy with how the handle looks. I go ahead and oil the handle, and once the handle has been oiled, it's time to cut off the cup. Now, as you see here, I'm actually cutting off a big chunk of wood there, and the reason for it is my chisel wasn't long enough to go deep into the cup, so I had to cut a little bit off. But still, overall I would say I was pretty happy with the dimensions of the cup in general. Once that's done, I ended up sanding the bottom of the cup, and I sanded it down to 600 grit, just like I have done with the rest of the cup. And one of the things you don't see here is, of course, I drenched the whole thing in oil once more, just to be sure. Oil is relatively cheap, and I drench it as much as I can. Now here I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. The handle did not adhere to the cup perfectly without any gaps. So what I did is I added some glue, and I decided to add some sawdust that I have gathered from sanding so much. So I sprinkle sawdust, I attach it, and I clamp it with this belt clamp that I have purchased. I didn't even know such a thing existed, but I was in the Mississauga hardware store and they had it. That's pretty cool. So yep, I did it, and there you go. The cup is ready. Overall, I gotta say I'm pretty happy with this cup. I'm drinking tea from it right now, actually, and it does taste a little bit funny, but I think it's just because it's been really drenched in oil. Once some of the oil seeps out, I'm sure the taste is going to become better now. The cup holds a little bit more than a liter, and I drink about 5 cups of this right now. It's best, you know, I do enjoy my tea a lot, so yeah, overall I enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed it just as much as I did. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys have any advice, once again, I would really appreciate it, since I'm too new and I have no idea what I'm doing. And with that said, I hope you guys have the wonderful rest of the day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!